We're here to talk about the big four, and that's not the big four blockbuster movies that are going to be out this summer, but actually on sports betting. I'm going to let my colleagues here introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in with New York. So, Richard?
Richard Schuetz. I started dealing for Bill Hare in 1971, which I think is longer in the have a life expectancy for been alive. Up a lot of different take us for a great deal of time.
Yeah.
You don't know how lucky you are.
Sorry about that. We're going to use that instead.
Yeah.
Is this a weapon or is this a microphone?
Should I scoot over to this chair just to be safe?
My name is Richard Schuetz. I started dealing cards as a college student at night to finance my education. I ended up spending quite a bit of time in a PhD program, 2 years writing on the Nevada regulatory situation, the development of that from 45 to 66. I then became a college professor and realized I was making fundamentally more money as a dice dealer, and so went back to the industry. Had the opportunity to work for Mr. Wynn, Mr. Adelson, the Boyd Group, Howard Hughes Group, and a lot of different people. I'm developing some absolutely wonderful story because all my fact checkers are dying. I also got the revolving door backwards, and so after 30 years in operations, up to and including being a CEO of a Las Vegas casino company, I became a regulator. I knew there was a revolving door, I just didn't understand which direction you were supposed to go through it. I was a regulator in the state of California, which I think brings me here today. I was appointed twice by Governor Brown. I was also the governor's consultant on iGaming, and I was also the legislative consultant to iGaming. And then I've done a bit of consulting here and there. I'm on the board of advisors for the National Gambling, or National, I forget what it is. I'm not a good board member, but National Problem Gambling Group, and also All in Diversity. I do quite a bit of publishing about women's issues and other things, and that's who I am.
Right, you want to go?
No, you go first.
Okay, I go. All right. Hi everyone, Per Hellberg. I'm doing what people think a lot of people shouldn't do, listening to a lot of conferences today, and that is doing a startup in this market, about to go live about a month from now. But we did a little bit different angle here. We thought that why don't turn everything around and focus on casino first, and put a lot of deal of personalization, niche target marketing, etc., to avoid the big marketing spend, but also actually have control over your total operational cost. So stay tuned and watch the journey. Yeah.
Catie?
So I'm Catie. I'm the co-founder of Weberfy.se, and I started in the industry 11 years ago as a customer support agent at Betsson. Then I've worked my way up in the last 3 years. I've been working with Hard Rock in Atlantic City, helping them with their marketing. Let's get started.
Very good. Well, obviously we're here to talk about the big four. We're going to start with New York, since that's where we're at. It's where we're here. Market launched in January, has one of the highest tax rates in the country, but has all the big players, for the most part, that have or will be starting up. What are your guys' initial thoughts about the market? Catie, I'm going to start with you, since you're on the end, and we'll work our way back here over it. But, you know, has New York been a success? Is it yet to be determined? Where are we at with things?
Has it been a success? Yes, but I think New York operators are, like everyone's saying today, they're focusing too much on acquisition rather than retention. And I think if they're going to keep their players, they have to switch focus. Like, it's very crucial now that they start focusing more on keeping players, because there's no real brand loyalty right now. I think it was Betting Hero who is at the other room right now speaking. They had a research where they showed that 3.3 betting apps are being used by New Yorkers right now. So they're going between these 3.3 apps to figure out which one they want to stick with. And now these operators have to make sure that these players get more loyal, they stay there. And I'm not seeing that right now. We've seen, there's been some shockers with Caesars. There's been some action with DraftKings. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think you can definitely classify it as success in one way, because they have gone live. And I think we need large states to go live, because I think that gives kind of reference for the ones to follow. Given the cost to go live, though, is quite expensive, as you know, both in terms of taxation, licensing cost. And I think the combination of companies you need to get together just to operate, that also kind of leads into maybe a little bit legacy kind of work, you know, how to run the business. But it's up and live, and let's using it as a kind of marketing tool to go into more states. I think that's successful. It will be a while until we break even. But yet I hear now rumors that there are going to be more states, more operators potentially come live, etc. So we'll see. I think it's a good move, for sure.
I really don't have much to say about New York. I think the most significant thing about New York is the operators leapt at the opportunity to pay 51% tax rate, and that's going to probably be something they carry with them for a while in other jurisdictions. I always make the statement that I wasn't surprised that they shot themselves in the foot, but I was startled at the speed of them reloading in subsequent states.
Richard, you talk about that, and I think this will help lead into the other three that haven't gone live, with the exception of Florida that had its brief 1 month window or whatever, how many weeks that was. But, you know, if you're a legislator out there in a state today that is looking at what best do I, you know, use as a model, and you're looking at New York that just went live, you see the volume that's coming through here. What do you say is, put on your operator hat first before we go to your regulator hat? You know, what do you say if you have a state that says, well, why can't you be more like New York?
Well, I mean, when you have a system like the United States, the state has a right to have a public policy, and I mean, Pennsylvania was kind of a classic example. Everyone said that wouldn't work, that tax rate wouldn't work, and Pennsylvania legalized gambling for a very simple reason. They had a $2 billion budget hole that they couldn't fill. So they didn't care about if there was black market gambling, or I mean, those weren't their priorities. They wanted to fill a budget hole, and they did, and it worked. And so it met the public policy goals, and you have to allow a state to have its public policy goals. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania quickly dug itself into another hole, and so they've had to legalize across a whole large number of verticals, and they anticipate the next product that they'll launch is slots for tots in the school system, because those politicians can't keep themselves out of debt, and that's how they solve it, with gambling.
Well, and I think you bring up one of the very interesting points about the public policy goals of a state. And obviously, as we start looking into the other three states that are out there, you know, there's some states as Pennsylvania, and I was the beneficiary of this, you know, when they did legalize it, and doing that back in 2004 with the act to do slots, and was fortunate on the table side, but some look at it to fill a budget hole, others look at it to be drivers off of everything else. Let's go to Florida, which obviously was hey, let's get some money in the door. Let's go do a compact, and let's see if we can get everybody else to go along with it. And then the court said, yeah, let's hold off on this a little bit. Catie, I'm going to put you on the spot first on Florida. You know, one, was what we saw avoidable? Let's start there. You know, let's say, did we know this was going to be the inevitable of where we're at today?
No, absolutely not. I actually was surprised when FanDuel and DraftKings went in with so much money as they did, like to stop Florida more or less, because they stopped it for everyone. And I think that wasn't obviously their goal, but I think we talked about this before. The thing with Florida is also, you have to consider, it's a lot of, in the US states in general, it's a lot of tribes. It's a lot of tribes you have to consider. And in Florida, it's the Seminole tribe. So that's not a tribe that you really want to, yeah. You
can say it.
Yeah.
Okay. We're all adults in the room here.
They're very big, Seminole tribe. So, no, I'm going to let you guys continue on the tribal side.
From your perspective, obviously there's a lot of dynamics that go into Florida.
Yeah.
You have the compact. You have what was Amendment 3 that passed in 2018, some 4 years ago, that you know has made it very challenging to get things done on the ballot. That was done purposely by a block of the tribe down there, as well as the mouse, which is the 800-pound elephant in the room, or mouse. As you want to say, how does Florida move forward in this effort? Where's their light at the end of the tunnel and not the train getting ready to run everybody over?
Well, if I knew, I wouldn't tell anybody, right? But I think it's difficult today, and we see this pattern in a long way, where you think you will walk into a logic decision to come up and launch gambling. But there's so many interests, land-based want to protect their revenues, you have the onlines want to come in, they push heavy numbers in there. And it's understandable why they do it, because they want to protect and push others away. But we also have to remember something that is a bit frustrating when you're running gambling, is that for the consumer, you need also a lot of choices in the market, especially in casino. If you only have 4 operators, it's too little. People need to churn between these operators, etc., to create long lifetime value, because they think they're struck by unluck, right? So they need to go to new ones. And all these things is preventing this from happening if you kind of limiting the amount of people that can operate there. But as long as they're coming in and want to do that, you have a strong tribal, you have the big guys coming in with the big kind of fees coming in. I think in the end, what's just for Florida, difficult to see in the movements right now what will happen, to be honest. I think, once again, if I knew, I would really benefit from it now and do my fortune on it, but I don't want to bet that.
Yeah, Richard, and you've been around this industry a long time. There were 2 ballot measures that tried to say, we're going to figure out a different way to do it than the compact that is still in the courts at this point over what that does or doesn't mean. You had DraftKings and FanDuel leading one that spent tens of millions of dollars. You had Sands that took a different approach that spent at least $75 million. What's it cost to get a ballot initiative done in Florida, and is that the best path forward?
I mean, I really never met a Mike I didn't like, but I don't have a lot to say about Florida. I mean, first of all, the way that Indian law oftentimes is like voodoo economics. They just make stuff up. And it seems that they have done that in Florida. Indian laws are very inexact science. And then the government of Florida has gotten a bit weird. And the Seminoles, I don't have anything to say about Florida. I can't make sense out of that. I just can't.
Do you have either anything to add as it relates to Florida and potentially a path forward for anybody, and any wild predictions on when we may see anything there?
I mean, horse racing is approved right now there. And I think in the next 2 years, they will hopefully have some progress there. But I think just tying it into California now, when we talk about signatures, the problem with California was that they couldn't verify, I think it was half of the signature was. Please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to. But the same thing now in California is what they're kind of worried about, that they won't be able to verify all the signature that is up in California. Have you heard that as well?
Obviously, part of the latest signature gathering process that came in, the 1.6 million that they had, that will take some time to do. And obviously, we've seen the process as it relates to the first initiative that was on there. And I'm jumping the gun because I was going to start with California with Richard here first, but I think obviously signature verification is one that takes a long time, and it's going to be quiet until they get through that process. So, let's jump into California, since you made that great segue. And I'll remind everybody, I want to open this up for questions. I know you can do it through the app, and I've been monitoring that alone, but I want to make sure we leave enough time at the end for those that may have some questions from the audience. Richard, you brought up you spent some time in California. You've been advisor, so I'm gonna kick it off with you, and maybe give a little bit of background. Let's start there over what's left and what the fall looks like as we're heading into this fall, and then we can sort of delve into the details, because obviously 2022 is a big election year for California as it relates to sports betting.
Yeah, I believe there's going to be 2 ballots on the measure. 2 issues on the measure. One is going to be what's known as the tribal initiative, which is already cleared for the ballot. The other is what's known as the commercial issue. There was a secondary tribal issue. A lot of people were surprised about that issue being held up just recently, and anybody that had followed tribal gaming in California should have known in the first week of March with the election of Lynn Valbueno of the San Manuel tribe that was done. That was done because she happens to be more aligned with Pachanga in a general sense. And so I think you'll see, and the city's measure is just a dog with fleas, I think, and won't go anywhere. And I don't think it's going to be sufficiently well funded.
Is that fair to dogs with fleas?
Yeah. So I think you're going to see two ballot measures, one on commercial and one by the tribes. The tribe is a retail only for 5 years, and the other one's a little different model. And that's a complex discussion. I was invited to Malta in November by KPMG and gave a 3-hour lecture of what's going on in California, and it wasn't long enough, so I don't know how I resolve that.
We unfortunately only have 17 minutes left of our session, which is why, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot to cover in a little bit of time here. But
I do have some thoughts on California, and they're just dramatically different than anything that you thought you would hear probably today and here. And I joined the tribal segment in 1991. I had been an executive in Vegas for a number of years and had kind of burnt out there and joined a tribal gaming company. And our first project was with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. And that was a tribe that was 90 miles north of the Twin Cities. It had a population that 65% existed below federally established poverty levels. The life expectancy for males in that tribe was about 44 years, and that was because of drugs and alcohol and doing stupid shit on drugs and alcohol and things of that sort. They had no health care. They were a society in absolute meltdown. And this was generalized, the statement of tribes across the United States. There was this kind of miracle of the legal allowance of tribes to have gambling. This really became material in California in 2020. And it's interesting to if you read the tribal history, it's not been one that's been favorable across the United States. It's been very genocidal. It's a terrible story. Even in California, about 95% of the tribal population was eliminated during and they were the last state in the United States as the European invasion, so to speak, took over. But in California, they took the children away from the tribal members. With the gold rush in the 1849 and 1850, the tribes had pushed themselves out into the remote areas. Well, that happened to be where the gold is, and so they went out and murdered them. They would actually hunt for tribes as a sport and stuff like that. So you do that for 3 or 4 centuries, and people begin not to trust you. And I think that you need to understand, when we put the casino in at the Mille Lacs Band, we took that population that was a socioeconomic disaster, and we gave everybody in that tribe that wanted a job. We gave health service for the very first time. We built elder housing. We had child care, and on and on and on. And I remember, and you can look at those statistics, but I was walking across the casino one day, and I saw a tribal woman at a Dead 21 game, and I asked her, what does this casino mean to you? And she said, this very first time in my life that I've ever been able to allow my children to dream of an education. And so what you see is the commercial model of gaming is fundamentally different than the tribal model of gaming. And I only mention that because we have so many foreigners here, and I think it's important that you understand that. And so what's going on in California is kind of, in some views, a continuation of the tribes getting shit on. you know, I mean, I hate to say that so bluntly, but I don't believe the commercial interests really want to solve the unemployment problem in California. I just don't. You know, I think that's a fun story, but it's not true. I think they want to get into a market that has 40 million people and the 5th highest gross domestic product in the world, more than Great Britain, more than India. And so they're going to go into that market, and that has the potential. And I don't believe the goal is sports betting. I think that's the camel's nose in the tent. I think the goal is iGaming. And if the iGaming goes over an internet application in the state of California, that's going to have dramatic impact on the tribes there, you know, because they have had about 22 years of success in about the last 5 centuries. And that needs to be understood. And what I'm going to suggest to you is they're going to put up a fight like you won't believe. There are, again, fighting for their survival. And I wouldn't think they're going to roll over too easily. They're going to spend all they need to do to stop this, because they've been brutalized for 5 centuries in this country, and they don't want any more of it. This has been the one opportunity they've had in their life, and they're going to take advantage of it. And so those are the stakes. You know, I mean, that's probably a different vantage point than most of you look at it for, but those are the stakes in California, in my opinion.
Catie, I'm gonna go to you a little bit, because I think you know, Richard was very spot on of saying, you know, and to your point, Richard, you know, I always joke about the fact that if we had all the iGaming dollars when this tried to get done 10, 12 years ago, the industry would be really wealthy. But there hasn't been a dime off of that, because we've been through this battle once before. You know, if you're sitting there in California today and you've got 2 ballot initiatives, you know, how do you see this playing out from your perspective? One's mobile, one's land, one's tribal, one's commercial. You know, yes, the commercial has to go through tribes to be able to do that, but it's a different dynamic out there. What, you know, from your perspective out there, what's at stake, and how do you see this potentially playing out? And I know this is being recorded, but we won't hold you to it come November to say, were you right or were you wrong?
Well, so having been working in this industry so long, I would say that sportsbook always comes before iGaming. That's a known fact. That's how you get your players in, through sports, and then you retain them through iGaming. So I think having sports coming first, that doesn't matter. Like, it's still, as long as it comes through, it's going to be amazing. And I think Morgan Stanley went out and said they didn't believe iGaming, or sports betting, sorry, we're going to go through to vote in November, but now they are. So anything can happen. And I think Californians are probably very, very interested in sports. They're similar to New York, very like sport oriented. And after the pandemic, they really, really need the money. They can see how much New York has been thriving now. They, in California now, are struggling problems with homelessness. And I think they know that bringing in sports betting now can generate a lot of money, a lot of employment that can help them. So I see you want to...
I was in California working for the government when the iPoker folks came through, and they said, do you realize that this could bring $300 to $400 million to your state? In California, we call that budget dust. Okay, the suggestion of the state with a $222 billion deficit is going to feel the dramatic effect of sports betting, I think, is absolutely incorrect. You know, and I think that's a sales line that they're told. You know, I just don't believe it's real. I mean, I ran the biggest book in Las Vegas for a number of years. I know what a P&L for a sports betting operation looks like. I live that daily. You know, that's not going to matter to California's budget. I just don't believe that.
The thing with California as well, it's very expensive though to get into the market. If you compare it to New York, I think to get a license that they're talking about right now, it's 100 million just to get a license, whereas New York, it was 25 million. So if you do get into the market, like, you have to be an operator with a lot of money to manage. But I think in the long run, yes, it's going to take some time before sports betting is profitable. But if you stick through it and you focus on retention rather than acquisition, it can be very profitable.
You're the man in the middle here, so I don't know which side you're going to take, but you know, how does this, you know, for a new operator that wants to potentially get into this market, as opposed to the, you know, handful plus that have backed this initiative, you know, where do you sit in something going, hey, can I go get a deal with the tribe today and be able to think the land base is going to work for me? Or, you know, do I hold out so I can get the big enchilada out there of mobile wagering?
You work with scenarios. So if you do the tribal way, you try to connect with the tribe and go for that. Typically, you would then then decide, do you believe that you need an online sports betting license to get an iGaming first? Then you need to go together with them to sort online, and suddenly you have to write a check for 100 million. So that creates some discussions, you know, internally, how you do that. Do you then go out and back an investor for that? Because if you do, you will be one of few getting it, and you will be one of few running a very large operations in that. So getting backing from investors is probably okay if you get in there. Well, what about if you do that and iGaming won't come through online sports betting? What do you then do? Do you then build up another scenario with somebody else for iGaming directly? So if you're an operator, especially a new one like us, I think you need to work on a couple of different tracks, because what is logical in business decision to sort of state is not logical because there are trillion lobbyists out there. So that's why you need to have a couple of, plan Bs and Cs in order to understand what will make you successful in the end.
I'm going to flip gears here because we could talk about California for a long time here, but I want to make sure in the 7.5 minutes we have left here that we at least get to Texas. And let me set the stage a little bit, because obviously Texas tried to do something last year. They're a legislature that meets only every other year unless there's some special session and some reason to do that. It's a state that's largely conservative, although that's changing a little bit. What are the prospects of 23, considering in 21 they tried to look at sports as well as land-based? As a guy that sat here for 15 plus years now trying to legalize gaming, I think 05 was probably my first time down in the Lone Star State. What if you're new to this whole thing, Richard? I'm going to start with you on Texas. What are we looking for come January?
I just don't have much faith that anything's going to happen in Texas. I started in initiatives in Texas and with Caesars 1993, and they were on the verge, and everybody's on the verge. That's a tough nut to crack. I wouldn't bet the futures on Texas. I'd take the over.
Okay. Catie, I'm going to ask you on Texas. There's one group out there that has 68 lobbyists still down there. Obviously, as a guy that's lobbied legislator, 68 lobbyists is a ton. Does that help or hurt the process over this in the long-term prospects?
I wouldn't know, to be honest, but I think when it comes to Texas, it's going to take a long time and probably going to be one of the last states to legalize. But I mean, just look at, there was a cease and desist very recently at the NFT casino, which was one of the most popular destinations in Decentraland, I think, in Sandbox. And they went hard on them because in Texas, I think it's in the constitution of Texas as well, that you cannot do anything with gambling, and just talking about the tribes there as well. It's not going to be possible, I think.
I have actually a little bit of a thought there. If you sent 67 or 68 lobbyists to California, you would never get it legalized. Those guys, the legislature, 30% of the legislators in the state of California belong on the gaming committees. They fight to get on those committees because they are such wonderful fundraising platforms. And they will have hearings forever and get enormous contributions from the tribes and the card rooms and the racetracks to keep this in play into perpetuity. And that's why the tribes went around the legislature. The ability of, politicians in California, and I was their consultant, held meetings on stuff they know didn't have a chance of passing because they were raising funds. I wrote a story about this. Some of you know it, and it was entitled A Parliament of Whores. You can't imagine what these legislators do around political contributions. And if they think they can continue that process ad infinitum, they will.
Heard you said quiet on the Texas front. We'll let you jump in here.
Well, in general, if you need 68 lobbyists to drive something, there's something utterly wrong. Because in the ideal world, you wouldn't need one. You would typically choose what is best for your citizens in terms of taxation, responsible gambling, and stuff like that. Now we're not there, right? I'm probably not going to be there either, right? Because there's a lot of lawyers that need to be paid. So I think based on that, from an operator point of view, just for those who aren't in that, if you thought 100 million today for California is expensive for sports, that's just a small piece what it costs today to position yourself to get something in Texas, because you need to go wire the sports team. And, to put up money forward STEM, to get sponsorship, etc., is very, very expensive. And yet, you don't really know what that will bring you. So it's a very tough cookie, to understand how to position yourself for. So as a newcomer, you kind of look for it for a while without taking any strong actions until you know what's going to happen.
Very good. I want to open up to the audience, and I hopefully can see if you do raise your hand before I get to a couple more questions off the market. But does anybody have any specific questions about these 4 markets that we've talked about today yet? Do I see anything? Otherwise, I'm going to jump back over there. Do you want to take a poll amongst here? Can I do a poll off of this right here?
You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I spend a lot of time in that state, and I'm on the phone at least twice a week to lobbyists and people down there. I would take the under on anything passing. I think they may go scorched earth out there. And I think that may be in the best interest of the tribes. You know, and I did a 3-week tour of California recently looking into a bunch of these issues, and I met with one of the opposition research people that's doing some work for the tribes, and they're going to go scorched earth on these commercial operators. I mean, they're just it's going to be ugly. And the tribes are very good at campaigns. They've been 6 initiatives that the tribes have been involved in California. They've won 5 of them, and the 6th one was just stupid. It was an overreach. You know, I worked for Mr. Wynn, and he took on the tribes and got his ass handed to him. You know, big time. He lost 64% of the vote. You know, so don't underestimate the tribes' ability to generate a very effective media campaign. They are very good at what they do. Very good.
Her?
Yeah. Well, if there's $100 million in place just to support your voice in this for tribes or for the commercials, there would be a big, nasty legal battle about it. And that doesn't normally bring things forward very quickly, especially as we read some articles last week here that they're actually upping the amount of money they're going to put in to drive their cause here. So they're up for a fight. Mm-hmm. And I think, therefore, I'm not very optimistic about this year. But once again, things can change, especially supported with a lot of money.
One last comment. There's a lot of noise coming out of it. I've been seeing some polling that's coming out of California, and it's nonsense. It's like, I saw a poll the other day that 80% of Russians favor what Putin's doing, you know, and I think the other 20% were shot. And those are kind of the polls that are taking place in California. You know, people are not as honest as with these types of things. And anything that you hear coming out of California, anybody that's certain about the outcome is lying to you. You know, but we've got a bunch of 90-day wonder consultants running around trying to monetize this space, but it's really complicated. I mean, even the thought that the tribes are a homogeneous unit is nonsense. You don't know anything about tribes if you think they all get along. You know, these are complex interrelationships. You know, sorry.
No, all good, all good. I know
I have some opinions on this.
I know we're out of time, and I want to keep everybody on time for after us. I've got one last question because I know we could talk about this the rest of the day. Of the 3 that are left, New York already there. What's the next state to move between the big 4? I know you can't say some other state besides like Missouri or Massachusetts. Richard?
I don't know.
I do New York iGaming.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
New York's
fair.
Gonna
Yeah.
No, I'm with Per on that. New York iGaming, yeah.
So the other 3 just sit and it's sort of anybody's guess.
Yes.
Okay.
day to day.
Okay. Well, thank you all for this. I know we all can stay and talk about this for a long time, but appreciate your time today and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.